Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
I think the mind is really, really powerful, and fantasies like that ultimately, the if they're subconscious type fantasies, then ultimately the conscious mind and the body actually has to act on those. It's almost the opposite of what Tony Robbins talks about with visualizing success and visualizing your career, visualizing writing your book, for example, what you're doing right now, Troy. And I just think it's a mistake to ignore those kind of things. And yet I think throughout history, we've done it over and over and over again. And until we really take those kind of mental images and understand the power of the mind, both in positive and negative aspects of it, I just think that it's we're just going to keep seeing these kind of mistakes repeated over and over again. And it's unfortunate because, obviously we have two wonderful young women that paid the ultimate price for it. And that's sad, but wow, what an incredible story. Troy, I salute all of you guys that were involved with helping solve these cases. And, thank God for people like not only, your lab people that were working so closely with you. And that's wonderful to hear that. There's some places around the country that don't have that kind of a synergistic relationship between the lab and investigators. And that's, so, kudos to them. But, Colleen, wow, for her to be able to just analyze this and come up with some answers, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So so Troy, tell us really quick about, what it was like to actually arrest this guy.
Again, the SWAT team went out to the Amazon distribution facility. He was very compliant. The Amazon security helped us. Basically, we brought him back to headquarters. And instead of, and we were kind of briefed on this or told that by the profilers we worked with that he would toy with us rather than just lawyering up or basically not talking. So he ended up, I think he wanted to know, these guys are brilliant. It's one of my takeaways from kind of this hunt of, so to speak, of this Miller character. He was a phenomenal artist. He was, and just had these things that he could have done so much good. Back to your earlier point, he could have done so much good just being an artist, and doing that. But instead he decided to go down this really bad path. With that said, sorry, I just took a little bit of a tangent. Miller, I think he decided to toy with us, and when we sent a very affable detective named William in there. We weren't going to send a female because we knew how Bryan felt about females. So we sent William in there. William's dad was a dentist, very friendly, just a great guy. And William really did an excellent job of interviewing him, but Bryan really pushed back when William pushed him on the canals and knowing these two girls and whether or not he murdered them. And he loved to talk about his car. He loved the zombie hunter. He loved to talk, about his family and his daughter. So, that kind of normal during an interview is normal to kind of build this rapport and that kind of thing. But when he was pushed in these directions, he very much threw up walls. And he said some really interesting stuff. He ultimately denied it. And he said he was afraid of knives and he was afraid of riding along the canals at night, which something else the profiler brought out is kind of what he called a sarcastic ruse, that these particular serial killers love to use these ruses that basically they think they're smarter than everybody else. They're way above the intelligence level of the police officers and everybody else. And they'll take pictures with police officers. And in fact, Miller did. And these poor officers didn't know any better. And since the arrest, they've been paraded across the media, taking pictures with the zombie hunter. With all that said, so that was a sarcastic ruse. He was saying was, basically, I'm afraid of knives. I'm so afraid of them. But yet we know he very, he tortured, mutilated Angela and carved into Melanie with knives, and so he's basically, that's the ultimate sarcastic ruse. So, and I think William, detective, was really disappointed that there was no confession. It would have been nice if Miller had said, yeah, I did this and those two, and I did X amount other ones, because we know these guys typically don't stop. But he didn't. He kind of maintained it. And he basically was smart enough to lay out his defense. So he basically blamed everything on his mother. And I guess his mother, for him, used to beat him with her security belt because she was a detention officer, threatened to cut off his penis, all these horrible things. So he set that up in January of 2015, which would later play out in court. And I don't know how many thousands of taxpayer dollars were spent on his defense to basically say that he had this dissociative disorder, that basically he blacked out and didn't know what he did. It was kind of a evil Bryan scenario, would come out and kill these girls and then go back to good Bryan.
Almost the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of a thing.
Yeah, that's what they kind of spun.
Wow. Well, I can't imagine trying to defend a guy like that, especially when you had all that physical evidence. And I mean, if you have DNA on the victims and then the DNA from the drinking glass, it's pretty tough to explain that away. But
yeah, everybody deserves a right to a fair trial. I'm 100% on board for that. I was just upset for the families that it took 8 years of all this legal maneuvering. I get it; it's a death penalty case, big case, but at the same time, there was COVID in the middle of it. So these families just sat and had to relive this multiple times. And one of the things Melanie, the younger victim, the second victim's sister, said during the trial, during the statement, she said, or kind of as it was wrapping up, she said, if you would have tuned in to after the first month of this trial, because it went on for 6-8 months, she said, you'd think that Bryan was the victim. So his defense painted this picture of, oh, poor Bryan, poor Bryan, poor Bryan. He did it, but he didn't mean to do it, that kind of stuff. I was just, to me, watching that was just horrific, that he was not the victim. These two girls were the victims. Yes, he may have been, abused as a child, but there's lots of people that are abused as a child and don't turn out to be serial killers. So it's just, and he never took, during his statements, he never took any responsibility, never expressed any remorse, never said, hey, to the families, I'm sorry. It was all about him and how he's going to be better and that kind of thing. And so to me, it was just extremely disappointing to watch that play out, but I'm glad those families got delayed justice.
Yeah. Well, that level of extreme narcissism and justification in his mind and, everything else, it's hard to fathom for normal thinking people, but there are folks like him out there, and sadly enough, they, he's definitely not the first, and I'm sure won't be the last as far as, refusing to take any kind of responsibility and any kind of remorse even for such heinous acts. But that's just kind of the nature of life. I think that those kind of people are out there, and fortunately, though, Troy, there's people like you out there that can ultimately track them down and find them. And that's one of the things that I love working with law enforcement the most is, there's a few bad apples, in every profession, and obviously in law enforcement is the same way. But all the people that I interact with, they're guys like you, the men and women that are professionals, that you guys have a mission to do and you have cases to solve, and nothing is going to stop until you actually solve them. And, kudos to you for seeing that through. That's, investing years and that much effort into solving cases and uh, getting justice for the victims. I think sometimes getting justice for those victims, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle of the day to day and everything. And it's but on occasion, I think there's little things that'll pop up that'll remind you of why you're doing it. And I'm sure putting the cuffs on that guy was kind of made it all worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for that. I know, again, it was a completely team effort. And I know every member of that elite team felt great that, such a positive impact. And I'm passionate. I've since retired from the department, but I've kept I'm a cold case advocate. I'm a volunteer with Parents of Murdered Children. And I like to advocate and speak and kind of hold these leaders accountable for having these bolstered cold case squads and funding DNA lab. There's a lot of backlog. When I hear that, I'm like, why don't we outsource? There's tons of labs willing to help, but for whatever reason, it becomes not important. And I want to make sure, along with others, that we spread, we force leaders to, this is a problem. We can't forget about these people. Murder is one of the most important things that police investigate. We've kind of got an identity crisis. I think we're trying to do too much policing when we should just get back to the basics and say, okay, and you brought it up earlier, what's the most murder? Okay, then let's get into sexual assault and child crimes, and let's really focus on those, beef those up, get really talented investigators in those positions, fund the labs, do that kind of thing. Instead, we're playing with volleyball with kids on duty, spending an officer's time doing that. And that's good. That's nice outreach. But really, when it comes down to it, we need to get back to basics. That's kind of the message that I'm kind of pushing forward. And I hope that my book, why I wrote the book, and I'll go ahead and hopefully I'm not getting ahead of myself, but
No.
Our squad was cut. So we basically solve this. We deal with the aftermath and basically clean everything up. We're solving 10 to 12, 15 cold cases a year, dating back to the 1970s, really rocking and rolling. We're very proud. We fly back to Chicago, get a national award. And it wasn't about the awards, but it was very, it was just awesome to hear, hey, we support you, we do good things. And then I remember in 2016, a new police chief came on board, and she gave latitude to the individual commanders to make decisions on cutting staff, because we were in a hiring crunch and we were way behind on the number of officers that we needed. And they decided, I got a call, and I remember, I'll never forget it. I was had our second child. She was colicky. I'm on one of those little toddler trampolines trying to soothe her, and I get this very cold phone call from the commander, who was retiring in 2 weeks, who said, "Troy, you're going back to patrol." And I said, "Commander," I said, "with all due respect, I and we have done everything you've asked us to do. We built this great group. We have a formula for solving cold cases. We just hand delivered a serial killer to you that everybody else thought was dead. And now you're going to cut us and send us back to patrol? Why is this? I mean, we're talking about murder here." And so I decided to write this book, because I'm like, I have to tell this story, because it is the poster child of why cold cases matter, why you can't give up, why you have to have talented, passionate people on these cases. Because it's easy to go in and maybe have one detective who's part-time or retired. There's no real, pressure on them, and maybe they'll shuffle a few papers. But you need this talented group. So that's why I probably could feel my frustration. I just couldn't believe it. So that's when I decided to kind of, I went to a detective assignment that was not really within my realm, and going from cold case homicide to, more of a property crime was, again, I wasn't above it, but it was kind of like being way demoted. So I just spent a really awful period on the department, just trying to get through the rest of my career. And then I was invited to come back to cold case. And I got a knock on the door from a lieutenant that said, "Hey, Troy, we screwed up. Come back and please fix it." So in 2020, I got back in the seat, and we got things back on track. And then they decided, hey, we're going to send you guys back to patrol for a couple weeks at a time. So it's just, if they would just leave us alone, I get it. There's staffing issues, but you shouldn't be taking regular homicide detectives off of, just my opinion, or a cold case or missing persons or sexual assaults. Leave them alone. Let them work their cases. They're already overwhelmed, and find another way. Find a better model for policing or staffing or recruiting. But you have to allow detectives to do their job because they're hunting really, really bad offenders in those areas.
Yeah.
Again,
Troy, I've heard this. I hear this literally all over the country. I mean, there's a couple of things that is especially frustrating to me when I hear this story. The fact that you guys had such a flagship of success, and the expertise that you develop in doing that, and law enforcement is one of those places that I can't really think of other professions that do this, but you'll develop this amazing level of skill and expertise, and then they transfer you out.
yeah.
So like every 3 years, there's new people coming in, and I understand people want to get promoted, and they want, if they're a detective, they want to move from robbery up to sexual assault and then ultimately be in homicide. I understand that, but when you have a specialty area like that, I just think it's so short-sighted for agencies, especially the size of Phoenix. But it's Phoenix. It's not unique to Phoenix. It happens everywhere where you have these amazing groups of detectives like what you had, and then all of a sudden they think that, oh, you solved the Canal Murders, and so now we don't need you anymore. And yet there's 2,500 other cases that you should be pursuing. I don't know. It's just a weird type of thing that you have a combination of people advancing and rotating out of different positions when you lose all that expertise right as you're getting really proficient at it. And at the same time, you have new leadership that comes in, like you said, the new chief and new commanders that come in, and they want to make their mark, and so they want to do things differently. Happen in the military all the time that I saw. A new commander will come in, and all of a sudden they want to implement rather than keeping things that worked, they want to implement their own strategies, and they just seem to just jack it up. And it's like, how stupid are you? Look, if it's working well, don't break it. But
Yeah.
I don't know, frustrating to me when I see detectives that they'll come into like crime scene, for example, an area that I'm intimately involved with, and they develop all these skills. They go to all these conferences, they go to all these trainings and develop all these crime scene level skills. And then next thing you know, you're rotating them out because they get promoted to sergeant or something. And it's just like, what are you doing? They lose focus on what their ultimate goal is, which is to bring justice to the victims. And the most proficient way of bringing justice is actually to solve cases. And it's not always focused on that. And it's unfortunate. So, well, Troy, I appreciate all your time. I know you have more cases to talk about, and I can't wait for you to finish your book. And once you get that done, I definitely want to get a copy of it. So we'll stay connected, and can't wait to see your progress. So, is there a website or some place, different social media connections that you have?
Yeah, I and I'm giving updates on the book and the book release. I have a website, www.troyhillman with 2 L's coldcase.com. I also, you can Google me, but I'm also on Facebook, Twitter /X, whatever it's called these days, LinkedIn. And I really try to kind of weigh in on some of these topics. And so certainly if support me. Again, I'm a volunteer advocate for parents of murdered children. It's extremely underfunded. I feel like it's unsupported. But these people are grieving. They've lost their children, which I can't even imagine. I'm a father, and I can't imagine that. So there are a lot of good groups out there. Season of Justice is another one. The Sherry Black Foundation. There's these people trying to do really good things and kind of put pressure on these leaders to say, "Hey, cold cases matter," and that's my slogan: "Cold cases matter."
Yeah.
Really keep an eye on that. So, thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, Season of Justice is amazing. They actually funded a case in North Aurora, Illinois, case from 1979 that they just solved, and the MVAC was actually an integral part of that too. So, yeah, it's cold cases do matter, and it doesn't matter. I think one thing, and this is just a quick note, you maybe get your thought on it, but I think cold cases are kind of a blight to society, and it drags it. It's almost a subconscious drag onto that community. When you have a murder that's just never been solved, I think there's a psychological damage that people really don't see very often, and they definitely don't pay attention to. Like, if imagine the Canal Murders having never been solved. Every time anybody drove, on that or walked or rode a bike or anything on that canal, they would be thinking about that.
Yeah, I think definitely the individual that did that murder got away with it, and so he or she is thinking, "Hey, I got away with it. Maybe I can do another one." So you've got this violent offender out there, and each one of these cold cases that we solved, we really tried to put out to the media and really send a message that, "Hey, we're not going to give up. We're going to be hunting you. We're going to track you down. We're going to use every tool available." And there's so many we've talked about, Jared. There's so many neat tools. DNA is just it's advancing in a phenomenal. Where I think I heard about mixed DNA. They're able to parcel out the different profiles now, so it's just becoming this thing. And so it sends a message to the bad guys of, "Hey, we're not going to give up." And again, this is murder we're talking about, and I found that a lot of people don't want to talk about it unless it's on Netflix or Forensic Files or something like that, where they're like, "Oh, that's neat," but until it affects them, it's not a problem until it hits their world. And I pray that it doesn't hit their world, but it does matter. And missing persons too. We work closely with them. That I can't even imagine not knowing where your loved one is, whether they're dead or alive, or what happened. That's another horrific area.
It's another reason why I'm doing this podcast, is just to get the word out for some of the things that, whether it's a cold case investigative technique or just advocating for a missing kid, whatever I can do to help. That's a big reason why I do it. So, well, Troy, I appreciate you coming on and spending all this time with us. And we will definitely put all your links and everything in the show notes. So if anybody wants to connect with you, I highly encourage it. And again, we appreciate all our subscribers and encourage all of you guys to go to Troy's website and support him any way you can. Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.